Good morning, everyone. Merry Christmas Eve. So, I spent the last couple of videos talking about A Christmas Carol. First, the novel by Dickens, and then my favorite adaptations and their strengths and their weaknesses. One common theme that I've found, not only in this most famous Christmas story, but in a lot of different Christmas stories, is redemption. Many Christmas stories involve a character isolated, a protagonist that has somehow set themselves apart from the world, and gradually, over the course of a series of interactions, they become reconciled to the world on Christmas Day. One of the most famous of those, from the classic 1966 animated TV special, of course, is The Grinch. The Grinch is just a version of Scrooge, although The Grinch is a more active Christmas spoiler than Scrooge ever was. Scrooge, as long as you don't owe him money, he'll pretty much leave you alone around the holidays. The Grinch won't. He's after your presents because he wants to steal or put an end to the holiday. So his redemption story is fun to watch. It happens very quickly, but there are no substitutes for the original 1966 TV special, narrated by one of my favorite actors ever, Boris Karloff. And you also have Miracle on 34th Street. Now, in this film, you have Kris Kringle at the center of the narrative, and he does not need redemption. He's pretty much good from the get-go. There's no need to redeem him because he doesn't really have any major flaws, yet somehow manages to be an interesting and charming character despite that. So that he represents proof that if you're a good enough writer, you actually can create a character with very few flaws and still have them turn out to be interesting. So Kris is not redeemed. Kris Kringle, as played by Edmund Gwenn in the 1947 classic. He does not need redemption, but all of those around him do. And we see him become a figure for redemption in the others in his life, including Doris and Susan Walker, who, mother and daughter, who are very much trapped in the real and the practical and have forgotten the value of imagination. So redemption is everywhere around this time of year in terms of its entertainment. So I wanted to highlight on Christmas Eve a couple of my favorite redemption stories at Christmas time. One is new, it's my favorite recent Christmas film, and the other is a classic. So I'll start with the new one, and that would be 2019's animated feature Klaus. This aired for the first time on Netflix back in 2019 and was nominated for a Best Animated Feature Oscar, which it would totally have deserved to win. Now, in this story, you have your flawed protagonist. In this case, he's a young man named Jesper Johansson, who is the son of the Postmaster General. In the setting is kind of ambiguous, but it certainly feels like late 19th century. And because all Jesper wants to do is live an indolent rich boy's life. That's all he really cares about. He's not interested in actually doing anything. And he deliberately flunks out of postman's school, but his father makes him a postman anyway and sends him to the most deserted, most isolated, most barren winter wasteland town he can find, a place called Smeerensburg. And if he doesn't get a certain number of letters with official postmarks, then he will be cut off from the family fortune. So this is Jesper's mission, to get those letters. Now, Jesper's isolation is a little bit different from a character like Scrooge or the Grinch, in that his isolation is more self absorption. He is so invested in his own physical comforts that he really doesn't have time to care much about anybody or anything else. And so that's his isolation. That's what he has to be broken out of over the course of the film. I've had people, or I've heard and read people who want to find something negative to say about this film, say that it's just a retread of The Emperor's New Groove. And if you look at Jesper's story in isolation, yeah, I guess you could probably say that. There is some truth to that criticism. But what makes Jesper's story different is that as he is redeemed through his interactions in order to get his letters, he starts persuading the town's children to write requesting toys from a reclusive toy maker, a reclusive woodsman called Klaus. And if he can get those kids to write those letters, then he will get the letters that he needs and he'll be able to leave Smearensburg and go back to his cushy life. So he accompanies Klaus on the deliveries of the toys, and over time, the interaction between the two men, it redeems Jesper. He becomes steadily, and he doesn't even realize this himself, that he becomes less and less self-absorbed and more connected to the community. He starts to actually make a home for himself in this town that he couldn't wait to leave. But he doesn't realize he's doing this. And he also doesn't realize that he's actually becoming a little bit like Kris Kringle as an agent of redemption for those around him, which is something I don't remember seeing from Kuzco in Emperor's New Groove. You have Klaus, because Jesper's not the only character in need of redemption. You have Klaus himself, who is not so much mentally or emotionally isolated as physically isolated. He lives by himself, does not welcome visitors. He leaves people alone and they leave him alone until Jesper shows up. And it is Jesper and the letters from the children that gradually bring him back into the community. So his isolation is undercut and he becomes reconciled to the world through the work that he does with Jesper and the interplay between the two. And Klaus is a wonderful figure. Mysterious. He's also a grieving widower. And he has this wonderful vocal performance by J.K. Simmons. Just a very fascinating character, even if he is not actually the protagonist of the story. And it is Santa's origin story, but with the interesting twist that he isn't the protagonist. You're seeing it through the eyes of someone who, initially acting out of self-interest, became connected with Klaus, and the two men redeem one another. But another character, this is somebody who does not have any parallel in The Emperor's New Groove. And this is Alva, who turns out to be Jesper's love interest. But she's more than that. She actually has an arc of her own. When Jesper first meets her, she has set up shop as a fishmonger, and she came to Smearensburg to be a teacher. But she found out pretty quickly that the people of Smearensburg don't send their children to school because the community is divided between two rival clans. You've got the Crumbs and the Ellingbows. And Crumb parents won't send their kids to school because they might have to interact with Ellingbow children. Ellingbows won't send their kids to school because they might have to interact with Crumb children. So there's nothing for Alva to do except try to earn enough as a fishmonger to get the heck out of there. So that's what she's interested in doing. She is very much like Jesper in this regard. They both want to get out. They don't want to be a part of this community, the home of the world's finest feuds, as Alva calls it. They want to get out of this community and start fresh somewhere far, far away. But in order to get the letters that he needs, Jesper sends a group of kids to what is now the fish shop. It used to be a school. Because these kids can't write. And if they can't write letters. And so he sends them to Alva to learn how to write. She at first does not want any part of teaching these kids to write because she's just become that disillusioned. And all she wants is to get out of there. And finally, she agrees. She says to the kids, "If I teach you one thing, will you go away?" And they agree to it. So she finds a little Ellingbo girl, Annalise. And she teaches Annalise how to write her name on the chalkboard. And "That's my name?" Alva, very disillusioned. "Yay, that's your name," super sarcastic. Wow! Annalise is just so thrilled with the way her name looks when it is written out on the chalkboard. She has learned to write her name. And for her, that's the biggest thrill ever. And the other kids in the class, instead of going away like they promised, the other kids in the class are all raising their hands. "I want to write my name. I want to write my name. I want to write my name." And this actually touches Alva's jaded heart because she sees these kids getting excited about something that she taught one of them to do. Now, I'm a teacher. And so that moment in particular of this film resonates with me. And that's one of the reasons why it is probably my favorite new recent Christmas film. Although there have been others that I've liked. Arthur Christmas, for example, I can highly recommend that one. That, I believe, is also on Netflix. But this one's special to me, and part of it is because I identify with that arc of Alva, the school teacher turned fishmonger turned back to school teacher. And she has enough depth to where she can't be just written off as the love interest. So we've got there are 4 redemption arcs in this story. You've got Jesper's redemption arc, and then Klaus's redemption arc, and then Alva's redemption arc, and then you have the redemption arc of the entire town. Because once the children start getting toys, they learn that there is such a thing as the naughty list. This is actually something Jesper makes up. But the kids don't want to be on the naughty list. So they start doing good deeds around town, and their actions end up neutralizing this feud. The heads of the clans don't like that, and they try to ruin everything. But, spoiler alert, they're not successful. So you actually have the town itself undergo a redemption arc. So if you're looking for a really good story of redemption, one that is beautifully animated and smartly written and has really strong voice acting, then I do recommend you take some time to watch Klaus today, if you haven't seen it already. So next, I'm going to talk about redemption in my favorite classic Christmas film. See you in a bit.